you, Sierra. All right, I'm thrilled to talk to you today about a wonderful collection we have from the Western Pennsylvania Humane Society. These records are part of a larger collection of records called the Humane Animal Rescue Photographs and Records that include both the Humane Society records as well as those from the Animal Rescue League. These two organizations merged in recent years, and hence the name change. Overall, the collection contains 13 boxes dating from 1874 to 2019. For my talk today, I'll be focusing on the Humane Society, but know that the Animal Rescue League also has a rich and distinguished history as well. These records include annual meeting minutes, annual reports, such as the one I have on screen here, a great selection of photographs, public relation materials, and more. So if you were to imagine like what are in these boxes, and you're thinking what are in the archives of a Humane Society, you might think of images like the ones I have on screen here. These are some black and white photographs in the 1940s showing folks with their pets, their cats, their dogs, getting some medical treatment for them. So you might be surprised when you instead see examples of photographs like this. These are agents with a very different set of animals, livestock, namely chickens, horses, cattle, pigs. The early mission of this organization is further revealed by a logo that they used in those early years, which shows an angel with a sword trying to prevent a man from beating his horse. So clearly horses were a big concern. And so why is that? So humane societies and animal welfare organizations in this country start around the 1860s, 1870s. This is a time after the Civil War when cities are rapidly expanding, industry is rapidly expanding, and horses are powering a lot of that expansion. They're transporting goods, they're transporting people on transportation systems, they're powering machinery that is in our factories, in our mills, and they often weren't treated very well. They were physically abused at times by their owners. They were neglected, not given adequate food, shelter, water. And often this treatment was very much out in the open, and people saw that and were just disturbed by it. So the origins of the organization that started here in Pittsburgh can really be traced back to a man named Henry Bergh, who started the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in New York City in 1866. Shortly after that, this woman who is pictured here on screen, Carolyn White, who was from Philadelphia, she met with Mr. Bergh and got some advice about starting a Pennsylvania version of this organization in Philadelphia. However, even though she was the instigator behind this organization, as a woman, she could not hold a leadership position in it. So she went and started a women's society, a version of that same organization based in Philadelphia as well. In 1871, Carolyn and a colleague named Mary Pennington came out to Pittsburgh to look over conditions here, to meet with people, and to recommend that Pittsburgh start a chapter as well. And then nothing happened for a period of time. And to be fair, I think perhaps this was still kind of a new topic, a new cause. And Mary Pennington, many years later, when she's looking back at her time as a young woman working in this field, she writes that animal protection was, quote, so new a subject and so much laughed at that many of my friends spoke to my grandmother, urging her to refuse her consent to allow me to engage in work so unsuitable for a young girl. But thankfully, Carolyn White was persistent, and a few years later, in 1874, she sends a humane agent from Philadelphia to go undercover here in Pittsburgh and to write a report. She writes a letter to the mayor of Pittsburgh and other leaders here, kind of chastising the people of Pittsburgh for not being ready for this movement. She also encouraged women to join and to be allowed to join whatever organization is created here. So finally, in 1874, the Humane Society was established. Some of the activities in those early years included the establishment of horse ambulances. I have a picture here of one. These were vehicles that would rescue ill and injured horses from the streets of Pittsburgh, from stables, and transport them to veterinarians and to places where they could recover. They established public troughs throughout the city to ensure that there was enough water for these horses. They worked to end dogfighting and cockfighting and to improve conditions behind closed doors in stockyards and in railway shipping. So another surprising aspect of this organization is also revealed through this other logo that they used in those years, which shows a woman literally shielding some children from an attacker. So shortly after their founding in 1874, they found that they were getting requests to look into allegations of abuse against people. Now, there really wasn't a charity or a government entity that was tasked with looking into these kinds of allegations. So people thought, well, you guys are taking care of animals. Why don't you investigate this abuse against people as well? So they established a children's branch and an age branch shortly thereafter. They sponsored legislation to give its agents power to legally investigate allegations of child abuse. Their agents were able to issue warnings and threats, but in extreme cases to also issue fines and arrests. Children could be taken away temporarily and returned to their families. In some cases, also taken away and given to other family members or to local orphanages. And here we have a shot from an annual report that shows two young boys, and the caption here is "Vagrant boys taken charge by the Humane Society and placed in good homes." So one of the really remarkable aspects of this collection are the case books. And this is provides wonderful day-to-day documentation of what the Humane Society was doing in those years. The books we have range from 1888 to 1906. I have an example of one of the books out on the table if you'd like to take a look after the talks. It is not light reading. It's not beach reading. It's pretty dark. So just as an example, the pages I have open here are from August 1890. There's stories of husbands not providing for their families, husbands drinking and physically abusing their wives and children, horses being beaten, and abandoned children. So along with investigating individual cases of abuse, the Humane Society also thought they could also work to create wide-scale change if they focused on the hearts and minds of the younger generation. So they did a lot of educational outreach. They established Bird Day in 1897, as apparently children were fond of using birds as target practice. So they worked with the governor of Pennsylvania to establish kindness education, which in 1912 was mandated in public schools. They also sponsored and worked on Be Kind to Animals Week that was officially launched in 1915. And here we have an image of some Boy Scouts participating in an event for Be Kind to Animals Week. They're holding up balloons. Inside those balloons are printed messages of kindness. And if somebody were to, after they were let go, find one of those balloons and that message, they could return that for a free subscription to an animal magazine. So another thing they did, and this was in the 1920s, to promote the care and maintenance of workhorses. They held workhorse parades in the city of Pittsburgh. These were events that workhorses from different facets of business and government could participate in. They could win prizes for their appearance and their condition. There was everything from horses that worked for dairies and breweries and lumber yards to mounted police. So these events drew thousands of folks to the streets of Pittsburgh. It wasn't until really the post-war years that the Humane Society changed its focus and started to focus more on household pets, cats, and dogs. After the war, there was the post-war baby boom and a corresponding boom in pet ownership, which in some cases resulted in abandoned pets or unwanted litters. In these years, the Humane Society would sponsor spay and neuter clinics, pet shows where children could show off their pets, and adoption events. I want to talk a little bit about how these records got here and what we've done with them since they arrived. They were transferred to the History Center in 2019. My colleague, Carly Lowe, who's our acquisitions archivist, worked closely with a volunteer at the Humane Society named Lori Boykin. Lori had been a longtime volunteer and realized the value of these records. Now, this was 2019 after the merger of the Humane Society with the Animal Rescue League. Sometimes when organizations merge, there can be a risk to their historic records slipping through the cracks. And Lori worked as an internal advocate within that organization to convince the leadership to sign off on the transfer of the records to the History Center. And that is a story that plays out in many different types of collections that we acquire. There's often some internal advocate within a business or an organization that realizes that the records of that organization are important and should be preserved and accessible somewhere. After we received these records, we applied and received a historical archival records care grant from PHMC, which is the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. This allowed us to rehouse the materials, and that is on screen here. You see an example of some acidic envelopes that the photographs had been stored in. We take items, photographs, documents out of those old folders and envelopes and put them into new archival folders and boxes. We process and catalog the collection, and we digitize a selection of images, which you can now find on the website Historic Pittsburgh. So thank you for your attention today. I'm happy to talk more about the collection after the talks today. And it is my pleasure now to introduce the final speaker of the session today. Margaret Hewitt joined the Detre Library Archives as manager of reference services in the fall of 2022. She completed her Master's of Public History at Duquesne University in 2011 and was named a certified archivist with the Academy of Certified Archivists in 2019. Please welcome Margaret.